Just see.
Welcome to your awakening. Please take all as your reality is adjusted.
Oh, are we lagged back? Yes, back again. Hello. Welcome, folks, to another edition. Excalibre, a couple of minutes late, like usual. Yeah, welcome back again this moon day evening, star date the 6th of the 1st, 2020. Now you have the vision. It's 2020. Look at those digits. Look at that number. It's 2020. Now we've all got the vision. We've ascended to the great sight. And now we can all see the truth, see reality. Hooray. Is that true? Maybe. I know I'm being daft. Being sarcastic and silly and whatever. But yeah, let's get into some of that. Welcome back again, folks. Greetings, well met fellow. Hail. Good evening. Hello. Happy New Year. Well, Happy New Calendar. I've been just saying Happy New Year to everyone. It's easier than trying to type out a load of context of, Happy New Calendar, Happy New selection of numbers in a sequence that we call days and months and whatever. Another year, another cycle has turned. You got to go back to the shop and buy another printed selection of numbers that you can hang on your wall and go, today is this number. I was thinking about this over the week, like I do. It's another year, it's another cycle, it's another calendar. It's not exactly really the new year. I'll mention some of that as well in a bit. And I caught up on Steve's show from last Thursday. Steve the Goose, just seen you in the chat, mate. Hello, mate. And he was, he titled his last show, "It's still now, it's always now. It's the new year, but it's still now." Don't forget that. So yeah, I thought I'd mention, welcome again to a new calendar. And hello to everyone in the chat room. Paula B, hello. Happy New Year. And lots of Tatro, hello. I'm not going to say hello to people that are in the chat, in this room, in the hangout room. Stewie, hello. Hope you're having a good year so far. It's 2020, the year of vision. And I think that's everyone in the chat room so far. Hopefully I won't cough as much this week. I've burnt off most of whatever it was. It's probably just flu. A mild case of flu I had over the week. A week just after Christmas. It's like get together with the family and you're there with some of the little ones, which are germ factories. Young children are germ factories as their immune system is developing. So it's quite easy to pick up a bug or two. And I got the usual winter kind of thing, just sniffles and cough and whatever. And I'm just rambling about being ill. But I'm feeling a bit better now. Still a bit blocked up and a bit coughy, but hopefully we can just get on with things before I lose my voice. Yeah, welcome to 2020. This is the first episode I've done in this new year. Maybe my glasses work better now because it's got 2020 in the year. Have I got better vision? Can I see further? Is what I'm seeing actually what I'm seeing? Is that the truth, or is that somehow manipulated through a prism that it's bending the light, spinning the frequencies such that I get a perception of something different than what it really is in reality? Many different poetic word salad ways of saying the same thing. But let's sort of jump into stuff, because I don't have any intention for any long-winded explanation of things at the moment, because I feel, and I think that most people are fairly aware of a lot of this stuff going on now, and now it's becoming the stage where the accelerator is really being pressed hard to the floor. Most people are fairly aware that where the vehicle is going, or certainly the general direction of where it's going now, is pretty much undeniable. Beginning the conflict zone, or extending the conflict zone into an area that they've been trying to get into for quite a long time. They set that area up a few decades ago in the 60s and 70s to be the opposition deliberately that they required for the next century. And we're only mostly 2/3 of the way through that century. So now they're beginning the approximately 30-year process, the one generation process of getting ready for the next century's plan. So that involves bringing down and destroying what is currently here, that phoenix process of burning away the old so that they can rebuild the new, supposedly the new, just the new style. You know, it's the current Gothic architecture that they're choosing for the societies that we live in. We're going back to that kind of imperialistic facade that has an undertone of occultic, esoteric, and almost, I'd use the word divine, but you know, that's just the perception they like to portray, a kind of divine knowledge or guidance that is unknowable by the general populace. You can't figure this stuff out. It's far too complex for you. You need an expert in geopolitics or political theory or economics, or you need this expert to be on a screen and preach, to give his sermon to you of what you should expect in the coming week, year, etc. You know, to give his predictions of where the best crops can be planted and how much of a tithe you have to hand over to the control mechanism to allow you to work the land so that you can have some GMO products to sustain you. Yeah. Again, I'm ranting and rambling, but that's part of it. That's part of what I do. If I can get my lighter working, if I can capture that phoenix for a moment. So the only thing I put in the subtitle this week, as I say, I think most people are aware of this kind of stuff, and hopefully it will make fairly simple sense. There's nothing majorly complex in it. Omelette of the Son of Man. Omelette, as in, you know what an omelette is. You know, beaten eggs into a frying pan, so you get that, you know, slab of fried egg. The Son of Man, as it's sun, as in S-U-N, as in the big burny thing up in the sky. And it just occurred to me as this story was breaking over the weekend, and there's a lot of context to this. It didn't just happen out of nowhere in isolation. It connects through a lot of the other agendas and the things that have been happening over the last several months or more, years in full extent. But anyway, the amalgamation of the son, oh man, the Soleimani. It just stood out to me. I've seen the guy before in the press. I've known about his existence, as it were, for a few years. I know that he's cropped up in the media every now and then when they've been talking about the Iranian military and what's been going on in that Middle East area of conflict and all, you know, that kind of stuff. He's not unknown in the media, so he's not like a figure that's just appeared out of nowhere. I'm talking about General Soleimani that was assassinated recently, over the weekend, by the American forces. But this time, obviously, when his name come out, it was much more significant because they're talking about how they killed him, how they'd assassinated him. But it stood out even more to me, the fact that his name even though I'm using an English language interpretation, his name contains elements that relate to a lot of the other things that I've been talking about over the recent months. The Soleimani, Soleimani. I think, I don't know if there is any further or deeper etymological connections in his name from the Arabic roots, because obviously I'm not an Arabic speaker. I don't know Arabic language in that way that I could, pull the name apart and say this bit's coming from here and this bit's from here. So I'm applying an English language interpretation to his name. But that alone I find beyond convenient and coincidental, that his name is such that it is, and the situation, the context surrounding what has occurred, his assassination at this time, with all the other things that have been building up over the past several months. The Soleimani, so like I say, it stood out to me, the soul, Mani, the sun, soul. The name we give to our local star is Sol, S-O-L. And Mani, obviously, of man, Mani, Mani. It just stood out to me in that way, of the son of man, S-U-N, son of man. And then you've got some, obviously, other connections, loose connections to Solomon. That name, although I think I've argued for a long time that I don't think it was a singular name of an individual. It was a title. It was a titular name of somebody who is considered a fully actualized being that has unified their connection of energetic self and physical self. They've unified their left and right hemispheres so that they have a holistic thinking. In other words, they're knowledgeable, they're wise, they're insightful, they're connected with their emotional self as well as their intelligent self, etc., etc. It's meant to be somebody who is at a higher standard than average people. In the same way as I talk about, the royal monarchy system, they're meant to be the best of us. That's the impression of it anyway. It doesn't match reality most of the time. But Solomon is sun and moon, the sol and the mon, moon. You also have those connections to the mon, as in the Greek mon, the singular, the singular thing, the mon, like monarchy and monistic. So you got that connection. The sun is one, and the one of the sun, the singular divine order, that kind of thing. But all of that stuff, I've been thinking about the past few days of how this very conveniently connects many threads. The man himself, General Soleimani, was allegedly, I didn't know him myself, obviously, other than as a personage reported in the media, but supposedly, allegedly, he was very popular, very well respected, considered of great ability and achievement, and a all-round good guy for the people that supported him. So he was a very important and influential figure, and certainly a highly respected figure amongst the people of Iran and many other Muslims across the world, but certainly in the Middle Eastern region. So it's quite significant that he was chosen to be the one taken out. According to the official narrative, allegedly he was planning and organizing further terrorist attacks. Therefore, in their fallacious claims of justification of their preemptive strikes, I can pretty much guarantee that somewhere in the future somebody is going to intend to do harm to me, therefore I should kill them all now. But that's a debate about some of the stuff that it gets into law and legality and the claims of governments and military institutions about why they do what they do and shit like that. And it all gets into a very deep quagmire of bullshit and legalese and manipulation. Anyway, I don't want to digress down there. That's a dark tunnel. But their claims of justification that they needed to preemptively get rid of this guy, to assassinate him because he was planning further terrorist attacks against Allied forces, American contractors. That's been repeated quite a few times recently. But if you look into it, the very question of, well, what do you mean by contractor? And was he actually an American citizen, or was he a citizen of some other nation that just happens to be contracted by the American military? Why are you now giving the same kind of justifications to civilian? Was he civilian contract or a military contract? Why are you giving justifications to these contractors the same as you would claim for one of your own actual military personnel or governmental personnel, agency personnel? Why is it that they're not even actually talking about who these victims were? There's no clear details about who the victims were. They could have been anybody, but it's used as a justification of, oh, well, their actions caused the death of our American contractors. Therefore, that's our justification to assassinate a general who just happens to be in the area. And we think he might be planning something. Maybe he's planning to have a kebab for his dinner. What do you mean we think he might be planning something? And again, no evidence, nothing. We're all just expected to accept the official narrative as it's parroted in the mainstream media. Pompeo's been on the telly screen a few times talking about how there is this justification from these claims of imminent threat such that they can take these preemptive actions, supposedly. Yeah. So, the Son of Man omelette, or the omelette of the Son of Man. With what I've been talking about the last few episodes of the Phoenix effect, the egg, the fuku, as in my suggestion last week about the concept of the cuckoo. We're constantly subtly given this impression of the phoenix, and something is going to occur where the old world is burnt down, the Phoenix effect, and the new world is being built. In this modern age of technology, you got to get with the new, mate. Everything's being rebuilt. All the old shit's being burnt down. So in that respect of the Solomon and the cuckoo egg being placed in a position such that it usurps the natural process of development and processing. Just the very act of seeking and asking the questions is the act in and of itself. That has been usurped by this implanted cuckoo egg concept. So you think you're sat on the phoenix egg, but you're not. You're actually sat on this cuckoo egg that serves the purpose of acting as a vehicle for the agendas of these other interest groups, be they a few small select individuals or world-spanning networks of conspiracy interrelated, or I should say conspiratorially interrelated networks of people and groups and cults, cult members, put it that way. This is all now coming to a breaking point. I think last week I talked about we're past the fulcrum point. I think that's been true certainly for the last year plus. We've been going over the hump of that fulcrum point. This last year there has been more major events and news events, the kind of stuff that we're often usually talking about. There seems to have been far more of them this year, and certainly as the year has progressed, they got more and more and more and more. The level of saturation became more intense. Whether that's a genuine and natural reflection of what is actually going on and building up in that way, like a snowball accumulating more snow, or whether that's just the perception that they want us to think that we've reached a breaking point. And they've been trying to persuade this concept into the general populace that this major war is inevitable, such that as each thing has occurred, as each stepping stone has emerged, the general public is like, oh, well, yeah, they told us shit like that was going to happen. So, yeah, look, it's just happened, just like the experts said. So the experts must be right. And the questions of whether those stepping stones have been engineered gets lost in the increasing saturation. And I've mentioned it many times this year as well, the hypernormalization effect of that increased saturation means more of the extreme and unusual things that are occurring seem to be commonplace to the perceiver, to the receiver of that media. Because there is so much of it now, it's like, well, it must be normal then, because it's happening all the time. Look, every day I'd say this stuff is happening. So more and more extreme situations, concepts that in the past or certainly in recent times would have been considered far too out there, far too extreme, are now creeping towards the middle ground of normalization of people just shrugging their shoulders and go, oh yeah, that's the way it is, isn't it? That's the new normal. So then we get to this cracking of the eggs. There's been multiple eggs cracked now into that bowl, and it's all being mixed up into one big omelette, supposed phoenix omelette. How many genuine phoenix eggs there are in there? No, probably none at all, because a phoenix occurs naturally. It's not something that is engineered into place. But these things have all been engineered. There are obviously at a detailed level, there are seemingly random occurrences that are part of that rollout of events. Of course, there are in that kind of general way of supposed randomness within this reality. But the key events that lead, that keep nudging the snowball forward, those key events, those stepping stones are planned and deliberately enabled and enacted. You know, the Americans deliberately chose to assassinate him now at this time in the way that they did. And that brings up another question, which we were sort of discussing a little bit just before we came on air. That general in particular had been put forward to lead a peace delegation to try and negotiate peace between Saudi Arabia and the forces in Yemen, the Houthi forces, supposedly the bad guys in the Yemeni war. That's a really convenient way for the Saudi Arabian governmental system, the agencies, to have knowledge of where he's going to be and when, because they're part of the process of that peace negotiation. So if the Americans wanted intelligence and details about where he was going to be and when, the Saudis were in a position to offer up fairly accurate, recent, relevant information because of that link into that peace process. While at the same time, they just recently announced they were going to execute 5 people that have been part of the trial, that have been accused for the murder of the journalist, I can't remember his first name, Khashoggi, in the embassy. Sorry, mate, so...
Sorry, I was just agreeing. Shouldn't have put it on.
Right, so they're at the moment in the middle of all that, while the war in Yemen is still ongoing and is one of the worst situations in the Middle East, in the world in total, really. But, it's still ongoing and most people don't even know it's happening, let alone give a shit like they give a shit about most anything else. What can I do about it, mate? It's all the way over there. It's not me that's dying. It's not anyone I know, so why should I give a fuck? But all of that is ongoing. So it's a really good and convenient and coincidental. I'm doing the apparently the bunny ears, to be sarcastic about the use of that word. Really coincidental timing, conveniently coincidental timing, that the Anglo-American alliance decide to assassinate him now because they claim that he's planning to do something naughty soon. And some of their contractors, those DIY guys that they employed to put up shelves at the local Iraqi hospital, one of them got killed. So therefore, we've got to start Third World War. No death is a good thing in that way. I'm not trying to suggest that somebody who's a DIY operative is not of value in that way. But it's certainly a really good way to spin the narrative to create a justification. And this is without even stretching into the connections, the long-running connections of, well, why would President Trump allow something like that to happen? What other purposes does it serve? Cui bono? Who actually benefits from the long-term effects of the disruption of the Middle East and the further exacerbation and creation of new conflict zones and a deeper problem that is going to never ever get solved? And oh, by the way, they're not leaving Afghanistan, and they're sending more troops into Iraq now. And even though the Iraqi government has said, we don't want you here anymore, you're no longer welcome, they said, oh no, we ain't going, we're not leaving, even though supposedly we were here originally at your invitation to help you rebuild your country after we destroyed it for you. Oh no, we're not leaving now. So now it's no longer an alliance, it's a occupation. It is a tyrannical occupation by an intervening force, which is exactly what it was in the first place. But now the facade, the bullshit, has been blasted away, has been burnt away by that Phoenix fire. So now they're forced to turn around and say, well, actually, no, we ain't leaving. We're here to stay. Tough fucking shit. We need our bases for logistical, strategic reasons to be in this area so that we can have a concentration of fire into that center ground in the Middle East where all the world's major nations are coming together to have that major war. I've seen in the general flow of the uploads, the stream of content that comes up through the YouTube stream, not just obviously the mainstream media stuff reporting on this, but other people's video content. And I've seen a few people mention the kind of Franz Ferdinand effect, which it can be, it's often thrown out there quite readily. We talked about this many times in the past when certain people have been suicided, let's put it that way. But this time it is much more relevant because the death of Soleimani now has acted as a unifying effect amongst many different people, not just the people of Iran itself. This connects into the religious elements as well, which also then connects back to that questioning of the Trump reasoning to push through with this agenda, with these actions, because don't you realize that you are giving the religious people in the area even more justification to see you as being the great Satan, as the great enemy that is killing off their greatest people for no real good reason. Your claims of justification are just bullshit. So you're helping to unify people that will become your opposition. So you're creating your own enemies. But that's exactly what that side of the system wants. But I was just trying to make a point about how the death of Soleimani can be very similar, can be correlated fairly well to that classic cliched event of the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, which started supposedly was the thing that started the First World War. Again, I'd argue that it wasn't, but the point was that the general narrative of history has recorded it that way because that is the impression they want the general populace to have, so that when they ask the question, well, why did all the nations start this terrible war that killed millions? Oh, it's because this one guy was shot. And he was so beloved, and he was connected to all these other people, and they were connected to all these alliances that meant all these different nations were obliged to start slaughtering each other. So in a similar fashion now, his death is causing more people to feel unified in opposing that Anglo-American tyrannical militaristic agenda that has been stampeding across the globe, nearly the entire globe. Certainly the Middle East has been stampeding across the Middle East for a decade plus easily. Really, it goes right back to the first Gulf War. So you're talking the 90s, so nearly 3 decades, give or take a year or two. So I just felt it appropriate to, I know many people are doing this, kind of talking about this particular event because it is very significant. And I know there's a lot of people that would just be like, well, there's nothing I can do about it, mate. It's just more of the same old shit. It's just more of that geopolitical circus theatre. What can you do about it other than get upset? So, well, if you expect to be able to sort of like step on the global stage and go, don't worry, folks, I'm here to save the day. It's 2020, I've got the vision now. That isn't the way it works, is it? No, it's what you do in your own life that has those ripple effects to those around you, and then that propagates out, and how we all choose to live is how the society around us grows and is formed. So if you don't give a shit about anybody else, even if they're the other side of the world, then you're less likely to give a shit about somebody that lives down the end of the street from you. So your society becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. You get these tiny little pockets of narcissistic selfishness that just want a feedback loop to say to them that everything's still all right. Don't worry, your government has regained control. Go back to sleep. Your womb is nice and comfortable. The Matrix will feed you. The Matrix will look after you. The Matrix will present you with images to make you feel safe and happy. Occasionally, we might scare you just to remind you how much you need us to protect you, but don't worry about it. Your government is in control. So what we're seeing, I feel now, is 2020. I know many years ago, quite a few people pointed out how this time period would be likely the time of the tribulations, one way you could call it, but also the culmination of many agendas that will need to be brought to the front or resolved around this time, the 2020s, 2021. I know we've got the connections to Agenda 21 as well, but it's all this time period. It's almost like there is a certain zone of uncertainty just after a millennium where all the cards have been thrown up in the air and people are waiting for them to start landing again, so you can start seeing where you need to put your foot in ready for the next century. And in a similar fashion, that seems to have happened this time. As we went through the millennial change, the chaos started to build up, and it's been showering outwards like a fountain for the last couple of decades. And now it's starting to not so much ease off, but it's got to a stage where it's obvious to most people where most of the debris is landing. So you can start sort of going, oh yeah, all the shit's over that side, I'm going to walk around this side. All the hot rocks are landing over there, so I'm going to go this direction instead. This time period seems to be a connecting point, a nexus point for a lot of the different agendas that have been playing out. Not all of them have been successful, not all of them will be successful, but the point is they get played out. There is a logistical lag in the planning to action phase. So often the system is enacting things that it planned however long ago, but the current situation doesn't quite fit what they expected when they were planning it. So it gets altered slightly at the time, or it doesn't result in the way they were expecting. I know, again, another cliche, every battle plan changes as soon as you enter the battlefield, because you can only predict what you think the enemy might do. You cannot have absolute certainty of it, unless, of course, you're controlling the enemy as well. If you're controlling both sides of that game board, then you can accurately predict what your enemy is going to do. But yeah, that's the further layer, the subtle layer of the circus game that is that geopolitical chessboard, as Brzezinski called it. You know, we think there are different people on either side of the chessboard and they are contesting over whose king will dominate that chessboard, whereas really there's only one person there, and he's moving both the pieces to try and make people think there's multiple people playing. So therefore you have more chance, more choice, more options, more freedom. But all of this political game is a theatre to lead towards a unification process of the entire globe. So there has to be a conflict. There has to be a deciding point. There has to be a final round in the ring where, you know, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, or 2 women enter and 1 transgender leaves. You know, if you're going to get all gender sensitive about things. 2 beings of questioning sexuality enter the ring and something leaves. Yeah, whatever. You get the analogy. That's the main point. This is all happening now. And if anything, this is absolutely something not to be afraid of. If anything, it's quite the opposite. Fear is mostly based in the unknown, as in, because you're uncertain, that's what initiates the sense of fear, and that fear is there to help keep you aware, keep you on your toes, keep your senses sharp, so that when the danger does actually manifest, or when you can clearly discern what the real danger is that is giving you that fear, then you can address it. So now that more of the obvious picture, the image of that beast is emerging from the foliage, more people can actually see it for what it is now and go, right, okay, to avoid that thing, to not be eaten by that thing, I need to do this, 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 and this. So it helps give you clearer confirmation of what your next actions would be beneficial to do. You know, what would be beneficial to do is your next actions. Whereas while that beast, while that root of the fear is still hidden in the foliage and you can't be certain what it is, then choosing which action to take next gets harder and harder and harder. That's part of the hypernormalization effect that they want people to be in, so that they fall into that learned helplessness of, well, I better let the government sort it out. The experts, they can sort it out because I can't figure it out and I'm far too busy just, you know, surviving day to day and getting the kids to school and blah, 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 blah. A lot of this stuff is coming out now. So if you're new to this, or if you're just starting to ask questions like, well, I can't make sense what they're saying. That sorry, get that frog out. That doesn't connect well to that. That can't be true. They told us this last month, and now they're telling us something different. And look what's going on. Asking questions is useful. Asking questions is how you discern where the danger actually is and differentiate between the perceived fear that comes out of that unknown and the real risk of where the beast is hiding, so that you can avoid that hiding place. I'm using a lot of analogies and metaphors and whatever, like I usually do, but hopefully you get the point. It's not something to be afraid of that this stuff is happening now. Of course, the possibility of loss and potentially worse, that's something to be concerned about, yeah, but it shouldn't be what dominates your mind. This is not about just making people scared because, oh, World War III, oh, we're all going to die in our homes, we're all going to be nuked, we're all going to be gassed, we're all going to be, oh, whatever. You know, probably going to be zapped with weather weapons more likely than anything else. But that and electronic psychological warfare is going to be this century's major danger zone, not conventional weaponry. Logistically, there's not enough of them with conventional weaponry, whereas utilizing modern technology, they can attack a hell of a lot more people than they're capable of with conventional weaponry. Yeah. It's not something to be afraid of. If anything, it's something to look at and feel a sense of determination, because now you're getting a clearer picture of where the dangers actually lie. Who's causing this threat? The same people that are manipulating that script to cause major power players to conflict with each other, to generate proxy forces that can then be used as fodder, that can be slaughtering others or being slaughtered by others, so that they can create a justification for a further extension of the next agenda. On and on and on it goes. When you see it for what it is, when you see the magician's trick, then the fear of what powers the trick dissolves. There is no longer any fear. If anything, there is just curiosity of, like, how you managed to get away with that for so long. I said I'd also mention about it's not quite New Year yet, is it? No, New Year's in spring. If you didn't know, or maybe you have a different perception of it, but yeah, the calendar dates that we use as general convention now are not really accurate to the natural world, the natural reality around you. The real New Year is in the spring, when the sun returns again. Traditionally, that's the way it's portrayed, you know, the return of the sun. We've gone past the winter solstice now, so we're at that point where the sun's making his way back again. The sun's going through his phoenix process so that he can return again in full power to reinvigorate our environment and enable us to sustain ourselves again for another year. So yeah, Happy New Year in a Gregorian calendar sense. Get yourself a new calendar, put it up on the wall, or yeah. I know most people don't do that anymore. I haven't bought one for donkey's years. Don't feel as much affiliation to being concerned about that kind of stuff anymore. I like to say Happy New Year to people and Merry Christmas and stuff like that, just because it's a social convention of a celebration of life. You know, sometimes I'll make the effort to explain further with people, but that's down to the situation of, like, do I think this person wants to hear this kind of stuff? Is it actually going to be any use to them? Is it worth planting a few seeds with someone, or is it better to just say, Merry Christmas, I'm glad you're having a good one, hope you have a good New Year, all that kind of stuff, you know? The intention is there, and that's the main thing. How we interpret it and how we communicate it to each other is where it gets a bit more culturally, ethnically specific, yeah? And what else was I going to mention that I said earlier? No, I think that was it. That's me done, guys. I ain't really got much to. I know there's, like, you know, there ain't exactly a lot of details in there. I don't feel a need to put details in. You know, there's plenty of stuff about this in the news at the moment. It's everywhere. So
Yes. Good evening. Hi, Cookie. Can you hear me?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Good. Because I wasn't sure, because I dropped out a couple of times as you were talking, but I came back in and you noticed. But I mean, the Iranian general. What can you say? You said most of it, but yeah, it's a trigger for wars again. You know, fingers on the triggers again, isn't it? It's this.
Yeah.
You know,
Potentially.
And the propaganda behind it all, and pushing that. You know, Iran is next door to Iraq. You know, they just want to take that last country, don't they? Desperate to cause anything they can to, and the insurgency going on within the Iran itself, the sort of protesting stuff that's happened over the last 12 months or so as well. that's been stirring up, and the internet going down, and all this stuff in Iran. You know, where they've cut off any sort of communications to try and deal with to deal with any problems internally within their own country, which are being created by external forces, no doubt, because that's the sort of way they do these things, isn't it? So yeah, interesting. And then we've got the Major General gone, and that's been all over. You know, the funeral. You've seen it all over RT and all over YouTube and everything.
Yeah. So they could have done it earlier.
Yeah.
Because as the situation has played out, it doesn't seem like I was trying to say earlier, it doesn't seem like this was just a random occurrence that they were bombing somewhere and he just happened to be there. No, this is like they specifically wanted to get the guy, which means it's been part of something they've been working on for a while, obviously, because they would have been tracing his movements and trying to locate him so that they knew where to bomb to get him and stuff like that. So it's like the timing of this, it's just after the new year. I know it's a couple of weeks since the date of the 25th, but part of that subtle occultic element to this is the process of the death and rebirth of the Son as personified in the story of Jesus Christ in the Bible, and the 25th is supposedly his birthday, and the new year is supposedly the beginning of the return of the Son. You know, that's what I mean. The timing of this is just, maybe if they'd done it at Easter, or let's say April the 15th, as in the Ides of April. Remember, we was talking about that earlier in the year, and with the Notre Dame fire and all that lot. You know, maybe if they'd done it then, connecting it with the spring equinox, that I would have said would have been just as questionable a kind of timing. But doing it now is sort of like...
Don't forget, there's a lunar eclipse on the 10th, and then you've got the big Saturn-Pluto conjunction on the 12th. And this is supposed to be a really, really strong conjunction, Saturn and Pluto. It happens like this about every 400 years or something, yeah? In this particular part of the sky, this is the beginning of a new cycle. It's so, you know, maybe they're trying to, you know, get their own pieces, in the position they want for the new cycle to start, rather than having something else come up, you know, creep up and take the news headlines. Like this, like Port Vale striker, footballer, apologises over a tweet that he made. Because now somebody on Twitter actually said, you know, how do you think World War III would end? And he says, well, the Rothschilds will end up owning every bank on earth. And somebody said, that's anti-Semitic. Yeah? Unbelievable, man. Yeah, I could have told him that. Don't mention the Rothschilds. If you mention the Rothschilds, that's anti-Semitic. Yeah?
Just saying that name, isn't it? That's That's how they've got it. It's how they've got it these days. Wow.
And it's I think this was according to the ACLU, you know, the ACLU, whatever. Supposedly, any implication that there is some kind of global conspiracy to control the financial market that is enacted or enabled by Jewish people is anti-Semitic. So if you make any implication that there is a global world banking financial conspiracy, that is interpreted to mean you are implying that it's Jewish people doing it and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you even mentioned Rothschilds in that kind of way, like, anti-Semitic according to the new rulings, according to the new definition.
Words like you can and cannot say.
It sounds like they planned this in advance, yeah? Maybe America will bomb them. For planning in advance, yeah? Allegedly.
It does demonstrate the societal changes that are going on, though, doesn't it? What's actually going on here. Where people's use of words have been then questioned. And so I've got feedback there or something, or echo. Can you hear that?
Sorry, Peter. I rejoined there.
Sorry, Dave. Just put, no worries. But it just seems to be that's the way it's being exposed now. And people can now see the truth of it and see, well, this is ridiculous now. You can't even say that word, Rothschilds, without being accused of being an anti-Semite. It's like, come on.
Well, it's difficult.
Ridiculous stage.
I was going to say, it's difficult for them to know what to do about this, because this is an actual footballer who plays in the first division. And he's read enough stuff online to be able to come out with this point and probably get all of his followers. Remember the way Celtic used to deal with the Palestinian problem? They got fined for it. Made no difference. Millions saw what was going on. Yeah? So
I think that, see, just touching on the idea that we seem to be heading, well, a feeling like a breaking point. People seem to be primed to be heading towards an inevitable war. I think that that's been it's been sort of primed or foreshadowed by at least a year of this endless division of intersectionality, identity politics that we see played out in the social media. Yeah. So sections of society just constantly at war with each other, shouting past each other with separate versions of reality.
Yeah, I was thinking similar when you mentioned about the automatic implication of the anti-Semitism, and that's being used as a kind of surrogate in the same way with the gender question. You know, if you make any suggestion at all, it's automatically jumped on and turned into like Dave said, intersectional argument of, oh, are you trying to suggest that there aren't these other genders, or are you trying to suggest that everything's only male and female? And even if, as has been proven not so long ago in the media, there's been a few stories about this kind of stuff, even if all you do is state the academically accepted scientific facts, people interpret it as being you making some kind of slur against people who have a different gender perception. So, you know, you can just say XX and XY, and somebody out there can interpret that in some kind of offensive manner, which in the past could have been like, well, that's your interpretation, mate. You know, it offends you because you feel offended by it. But now we can actually initiate a legislative process, which means you can get prosecuted, you could get fined or more, just because you made a statement of scientific fact. That's, you know, we're getting to this point where, like, the Rothschilds and their involvement in major finances globally is an absolute fact. It's not a speculation. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. But if you bring that up in public, oh, anti-Semitic, and because the Rothschilds happen to be Jewish. So who is the actual racist here? Because you're presuming that I'm implying that the reason they're in the position they're in is just because they're Jewish. So you're the one creating the racism, not me by stating the fact that they are in that position. Yeah, this is, to me, this is the revealing of the tyranny. Because even when you try to convey something that is accepted as a fact, that is spun, that is deliberately manipulated and spun into something that agitates certain predefined groupings. That's that intersectional effect. Yeah, the reason they push this concept of that intersectional structure or stratification is so that they've got multiple groups to fire against each other.
Endless division.
Over the years, I've put it across as the point of, if you don't have an enemy, they will create one for you. So you can be, you know, the perfect, nicest, most peaceful person. You love everyone. You give everybody time. Blah blah blah. They'll figure out somebody that will be against you for some reason, because they need the two sides to smash against each other.
Alien.
See this guy here, UK's most prolific. He was drugging people on the streets of Manchester, taking them back to his flat and raping them. Men, 130 men at least, this guy raped. Now, he can't be that smart, because otherwise he would have converted to Judaism over a year ago. And when he ended up going to court, he would have just said, oh, that's anti-Semitic. To accuse me of 130 rapes, that's anti-Semitic. And he would have got off with it, yeah? So, I mean, you know, that's how it looks, yeah? You can get away with anything, even the rape of a young girl, which is why the ADL was set up, which reminds me of Grace's video the other day, which was good.
Yeah.
Well, they do get away with anything, don't they? They just got away with, they just do what they want. They act in the way that they want to act and kill who they want to kill.
There's been
invade the country they want to invade. They'll just do it. They'll do it in these little gradual steps, as we always see, but get to the end goal, which is the country they're after, which is that region, or destabilize that region to such a degree it's easy for them to do it.
That's the one I was thinking of as well. That girl who was supposedly accusing, it's a bunch of Israeli kids, wasn't it, or lads, whatever. Supposedly she's been now prosecuted for lying. Yeah, so I was going to say, there's been a few of these stories based around sexual assault and rape that have been filling up the news media recently. And at first I was thinking maybe it's just connected to the kind of law and order element that they usually put in most elections. But that story came up after the election. And now this latest one, this guy, prolific rapist, whatever. There's something else going on with that. I wonder if it's a kind of subtle appropriation of people's sexual energy to twist it to something dark, because they're giving people, well, that one as well connects into the kind of anti-Semitism stuff and whatever as well. Yeah.
I was going to say, because there was one in England not so long ago where a girl had accused one guy. She got found out and she was really charged for it, heavy.
Yeah.
Now this one here, you're saying she's taken her story back and she stopped accusing the Israelis, and the president's going to give her a pardon, allow her to go home. So she's been paid off, if possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one I think is worth mentioning as well, the event in New York, which happened just before, or a couple of days before, the assassination of Soleimani. And again, it was something that got pushed with the anti-Semitism element. Yeah.
That was known as domestic terrorism, apparently. That was branded as a day
but
after.
They saturated the news media with the anti-Semitism of the 5 people being stabbed, while at the same, or not long after, there was that attempted attack in a church where I think it was one of the preachers shot the guy, when he'd only managed to fire off one shot, and then members of the congregation killed him before he could do any more damage. These things seem to be amassing deliberately, or being portrayed in the media that way anyway. Extremism, religious extremism, and provoking that anti-Semitic narrative.
Well, the thing about Weinstein and all these other sexual predators, people sit there sort of, slamming the desk saying, yes, do it, go for them, put them in jail. And it builds up that desire for vengeance. So it's already stoked when they turn it on Iran. All they need now is like, Iranian-backed ISIS, ISIS members are raping fucking whatever, Turkish girls.
Or like they did with Gaddafi, and they'll put out stories about Viagra rape gangs and stuff like that.
You've got, see that Katie Hopkins. I mean, see that story there. That would have suited her because it was a brown guy. You know what I mean? She's fucking tweeted all about that. And the other copper, see the copper that's up for the sex trafficking. I'm not. These two are evil bastards. But you've got people like that, Katie Hopkins, because he's a fucking black guy, because he's a brown guy. It's like, look at these crimes. You know what I mean? She never ever fucking mentions like any white crime or anything like that. You know what I mean? You've got agents of division. You know what I mean? That highlight certain fucking story slash.
Would she be upset if Prince Andrew was a brown guy? Would then she be coming forward going, look at what he's done, yeah. That's been going for a while, and that sort of came to the front back when the Rotherham scandal came out. And the number of people that were coming at us going, oh, you see, these brown guys are all nasty, you never talk about these cases. Like, yes, we do. Where were you when Jimmy Savile was fucking doing shit, huh?
Where was
all you care about is the fact that they're brown or Muslim or Hindu or whatever. There's something different to you, and you think it's that difference that causes them to be a nasty person. It's like, no, they were a nasty person. White Anglo-Saxon wasps can be nasty people as well. Is it their religion or their skin colour that causes them to be that way? That's that division tactic effect again.
And dehumanize your enemy so you can get away with doing whatever you like.
Yeah. You don't get why he likes to wear certain clothing or whatever. Therefore, that means you should be afraid of him. It's that fear of unknown effect. That's why if you, and I know I've talked about this before, and I know for a lot of people it's a bit of a cliche, but traveling and encountering other people, other cultures, other ethnicities is a way to broaden your mind and give you a better comprehension of reality, because it breaks down those unknowns, those fears that are based on the unknown. You don't know why certain people in the world like to do things a certain way because you've never experienced their culture, you've never interacted with them. Therefore, you're afraid of the unknown element of what you think, what you perceive, or what you're told is part of their culture. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the reality.
The other thing I'm noticing, I mean, like say, like these stories about these guys have been charged. That guy's been charged with all the rape offences or whatever. It's the death of due process now, isn't it? As soon as somebody's charged, that's it. He's a fucking monster. It's
death by social media, or trial by social media. Certainly, for a lot of people, it's certainly the end of their careers. So you could say it's sort of like, you know, ego death. That could be beneficial in a way.
Even Harvey Weinstein, I mean, is he not supposed to still have a fucking a court date before he's condemned?
I think he's up in court again today, or was up in court today, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, let's have the fucking due process back. You know, that's all I'm saying.
Some of it
condemn
as well,
him when it's time to condemn him.
Some of it as well. I think that's what I mentioned when we was looking at the other two stories. You know, some of it is deliberately put in the press because it encourages the public to demand legal processes carried out. So in other words, it's a way of getting the public to justify the system as it is. You know, so it's like, oh, look, folks, you better agree with us having our court system because look at all these bad people in your world. You know, so they like to encourage the public's perception of those kind of people getting dealt with, you know, as in the law has caught them and now they're going to get prosecuted.
It's up to you. You can have the law of the land or the law of the jungle. You know, you can have the enemies have got the law of the jungle. You know, we're the civilized ones.
Yeah, you know what? I'm surprised he had time to make any movies. Looking at all them women he was fucking chasing around.
That's Hollywood, don't it? Yeah, when they list their names as producer and executive producer, you ever wonder what exactly it is that they do? And a lot of them, like Wienerstein, most of what they do is they act as a network connection for other people. That's it.
They raise the money. They organise the raising of the money.
Yeah, which is they phone up some of their people they know in their black book, like Epstein did, you know, and they'll say, "Oh, I want you to come and do this. Can you fund this project? This project looks good. Get on this." They're just network people, network connectors.
And if the director's lucky, they won't have any say in the film whatsoever, other than sort of cast this person because we owe them a favour. Because a producer is not a director in most cases, not the bigger ones.
Hollywood.
When they have like executive producers or special producers, that just means there's somebody who was key in that network connection so that they could get access to certain people. You know, it's like, well, we desperately need so-and-so to be a producer so that we've got access to his network of people.
It's actually a little bit, it's the opposite of real life, where if you make something, you are producing it for the market, whereas these guys actually do nothing. They don't even make the film or star in it or anything. Yeah, they are the middlemen.
The facilitators. That would be their argument. They facilitate the process to get underway, to actually happen. Yeah. And that just, you know, shows how those middlemen dominate that environment such that nothing happens unless they're there to join the two cables together, kind of thing. Yeah, like the cable guy. So, you don't get your programming unless you let me in to connect the cable for you.
I guess the
only reason invite the vampire in.
The only reason Weinstein can't claim that all these allegations are anti-Semitic is because half of the victims are Jewish.
They call them victims. They were only fucking crying when they were making their money, you know. 20 years later, they're a victim in fear, you know.
Yeah.
I imagine there are some real victims out there that didn't make a cent. Yeah? They can't get their voices heard.
And please don't forget that as well is part of the dehumanizing process of normalizing abuse, normalizing an abusive relationship, because there should not be, and I'm saying should with careful use, because you can argue about this, whatever, but there should not be a stratification of victimhood. That's something the system really likes us to do, because once you begin stratifying victimhood, then at some point they will be able to get you to move those goalposts. So somebody you used to consider a victim, or used to gain that kind of status and everything that went along with it, will suddenly slip off your leaderboard, because now what happened to them is not quite as bad as what happened to the other people further down the list. Do you see what I mean? It's a slow dehumanizing process of normalizing us to harm to others, to abusing others. I think this is part of why you get the kind of troll culture online, because now it's considered something that is just normally part of life. You know, you go on the internet, you're going to encounter trolls. So something that normally used to be considered a victimization is now just considered an everyday part of normal life. You know, it's not victim anymore. It's just like, oh, you got attacked on the internet, you got abused on the internet. Well, what do you expect? It's the internet.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of Magna Carta, that all men have the right to presumption of innocence, but it didn't apply to us ordinary people.
Yeah.
But there's another thing I read today. I saw it today by Guy Scott, and the Crime Bodge covered it as well. This is private police forces saying that when people are caught shoplifting or pickpocketing, a lot of the time it takes a long time for the police to turn up, and then when they do, they'll sometimes let people go. Yeah. So some of the richer areas are now hiring these ex-coppers as a private police force. But then the article went on to say that they deal with things like assault, shoplifting, pickpocketing, and drug dealing. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Anybody has the common law right to stop a shoplifter, a thief, anybody doing harm, loss, or injury. So basically, they're just using the common law rights that we all have. Yeah. If you see somebody assaulting them, you can arrest that person. If you see somebody stealing, you can arrest that person. So can they, as paid private policemen. But you can't interfere with a drug dealer. Not if you're a private policeman. You have no remit for that at all. Yeah. So they're grabbing people. They see a drug deal, they grab those people and hold them for the police. And they're even carrying out their own private prosecutions. No, that's no go. Yeah, I mean that's the line where they cross. Yeah, because like I say, common law says any of us can do that. If they want to get, if you want to pay somebody to do what you ought to do anyway, okay. But your powers or my powers don't go as far as arresting somebody for dealing drugs, because that's not common law. They're not hurting anybody.
You have to prove harm and loss.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where they step over the line and expect people to want to take it. And it also ties in what you're saying about different types of victim. If you're rich, you're a victim of anything. Even seeing some dirty person on the street doing a drug deal, you're offended, and private cops will stop that. It doesn't work for people living in the East End,
Another way I've tried to put it across before is like, I feel offended, I feel victimized when I hear the bullshit of the politicians when they're on the TV spouting crap. It's like, can I get a fucking prosecution against them for victimizing me with their psychological bullshit?
And lies.
Yeah.
That's the next thing Boris will come out with. We was just voted in, and that gives us a mandate to back America in their war with Iran. Oh, no. You was voted in for Brexit because Corbyn was paid to take a fall, basically. Yeah, Corbyn the boxer. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, the anti-Semite.
The anti-Semite. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the whipping post. The Judas goat. Perfectly the what do they call it? Stalking horse. or the running mate there to keep the race going, but has absolutely no intention to win at all because he's just going to throw it at the end before the end of the last race.
Well, yeah, the Fabian Society, when they started the New Statesman magazine, which a lot of the Fabians used to write for New Age magazine, which was a guy who was following Gurdjieff's teachings, and it would have been absolute peace. So in, I think it was about 1912, George Bernard Shaw and all these other Fabian socialists stopped writing for the New Age magazine, and they opened up their own magazine, New Statesman, which was going to say, well, of course, the socialists and international labour, we absolutely appall, we find this war appalling, but the Kaiser is a dictator and we'll have to go to war anyway. That was the whole reason for it, yeah? They're kind of passive sort of, oh, we don't want to go to war, but I suppose we have to. And they're probably going to do the same thing now, yeah?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much what, well, sort of reading between the lines of Dominic Raab's statements earlier today, he's basically saying the same. Oh, we don't really agree totally, but we support our allies, the Americans. Yeah, so
yeah,
we'll be a good little poodle, just like last time.
If all these so-called lefties that want a world domination, United Nations, socialist, communist, and dictatorship government, well, they can't have that until all the countries of the world have been dominated. So that includes Iran, Syria, and all the other free nations. So the capitalist fascist machine has to bring them all into line before the sort of communist overlords can take over the whole thing, I suppose. But by then it'll...
I mean, I was thinking, why would they want a war? I mean, they're all mega rich. They're all sucking us really well, you know, milking us really nicely. They're all, you know, making huge profits. And, you know, why would they want to go in and, you know, cause all this shit? And possibly... if they have a war with Iran, or Iran starts to kick off, you know, Russia, China, and it becomes very messy. Did anybody want that?
For them. They want everything.
They want everything, yeah.
I personally, I don't think it's about the wealth, or I should say finances, really. You know, wealth is a different term, but I don't think it's about the money, because they can print as much as they need. It's not really about the resources, because they could trade for the resources if it came to it. And again, the claims for, or reasoning behind why they don't trade and why instead they try to take it militarily, is because the profits would be greater if they own it themselves rather than having to trade for it. But again, that's a, you know, that's a false presumption, or a false premise, because your previous premise showed that they don't need to worry about money because they can print as much as they want. So therefore, them making more profit by owning it themselves rather than trading with the original owner makes no sense. You know, so what I mean, it's a false premise. It's not about the money. It's not even about the ownership of the resources, because they could set up trade networks to do what they need to do and to supply us all as consumers and blah, blah, blah. But instead they choose to push this militaristic narrative. So I don't think it's really to do with anything in terms of the military gains in the location where this stuff is happening. It's more about the stuff that's happening at home. This is more about changing the home environment, not the foreign environment where the war is actually taking place. That is purely to create the justification so the public at home will accept the changes at home. They want to take us into a new century, a new paradigm, a new technological control system, such that, and I don't want to go into a laundry list, because I know we talked about this, you know, again and again and again, but you know, all the stuff we're often talking about, how, you know, every device will be tracking you, all your data will be accumulated, there will be no privacy, there will be no there will be no natural procreation, there will be breeding licenses, and there'll be controlled genetics, and there'll be cybernetics, and there'll be transhumans and all this kind of stuff. And they need the public to actually accept that, because it would not be practicable for them to enforce it by force. So they need the public to adopt it and it to become normalized and be accepted as normal everyday life. And the best way to do that is to utilize an unassailable, unbeatable enemy, a phantom menace. Yeah, I know I used this analogy years ago because I thought it was good timing when those Star Wars films were coming out at the time. A phantom menace, something that just like trying to fight a cloud. You can never really eradicate it. So you get that Orwellian perpetual war, and the perpetual war gives you the justification to build a surveillance, technocratic, dystopian prison system at home.
Yep.
Money isn't really what it's about. Money is just the grease that makes the wheels work, that persuades many people to join in the project. They want us to all be putting those pyramid bricks one on top of the other. How do they get people to do that? They give them these little bits of paper that the people can then trade for convenience and gifts and spangly, sparkly things that make their life feel better. That's why they go to work every day and put another brick on top of another.
Yeah, well, as soon as you mentioned the word pyramid, I was thinking that they're driven by fear, because they know if their machine doesn't keep going and achieve their eventual end goal, it will, like a pyramid scheme, collapse.
Yeah.
So they have to keep going forward. They can't stop and say, well, you know, it's a bit crazy. We want to control the world. Let's just let people live their lives. And no, because their system collapse. Yeah.
That as well is where I think it gets into. I don't know, this can be something that requires a lot of context and explanation and talking about, but in effect, it's where it gets into them, the ubiquitous they, being very much like a completely different race to the rest of us. Because they've been at this stuff for so long, it has become so embedded in them, in their psychology, in their genetics, in their attitudes, in their ideologies, their belief systems. It's so ingrained into them that they see themselves as existing in a completely different reality to everybody else. Yeah. That's why they use that kind of deceptive kaleidoscope via the media and the culture that they trickle down to people, so that it acts like the illusionist trick to keep people going back to work day after day. Because the way they entrain people, a lot of people don't have the cognitive ability to be able to comprehend what they're doing. So they see themselves as being some kind of intellectual elite, you know, or spiritual elite, you could call it, even separate from everybody else. I would argue that they don't really exist separately to us, but they perceive themselves in that way. Eugenics doesn't really apply to them. Even though they will pick and choose who they breed with, the very concept of them not breeding at all would be totally out of the picture. While they tell us to cut down on how many kids we have because it's bad for climate change, they themselves are pumping them out as much as they can. Kate had how many kids? They're all having how many kids that are in the news every day, day after day. Look at all the royal babies. Look how cute they are. But don't you have a baby?
Yeah, two things on that. I watched the Tudors with King Henry, and like he was absolutely certain that God had made him king, to be king. And then I've been watching the Medici, and just out of interest, because the other day I was looking up the Borgias, and one of the descendants of the Borgia was actually the fucking prime minister of Argentina, or it might have been Chile. He was like one of the 1970s prime ministers, presidents of Chile. And the Medicis, they actually go into the Habsburg line, which was Queen Victoria's line, and really graceful put up a great video the other day in which somebody tries to debunk the fact that 50 US presidents were all related to King John. Now that is no way. Like, and then somebody comes in and says, "Oh yes, but if you go back far enough, we're all related to King John." No fucking way, no way, because King John and the 100 people around him will only mix with about 500 people under them. Yeah, and then all that mixes together, and then out of those 500, if you're a peasant slave like us, 1 in 10,000 of us rise up to the middle class every generation, and maybe 1 in 1,000 of the middle class get into the top 1,000 of the upper class every generation. Yeah, it's not just a straight mixing thing. Yeah, so these, like I said, you can go from Medicis in 1400 to the Queen of England now, and they're tied together. Yeah. I mean, this is just...
It's one of the main nexus points in history.
Yeah, and all these big families, they've all got their own family book, and they trace them out. And
well, you know what? You know what? The thing that I think I feel is the thing that grounds me is the fact that they can't change things like the solstices, the winter. So, they can't change what's going on. Well, to a certain, some would argue they could with certain various techno gadgets they've got to change reality in the sky, but generally speaking they can't do it. They can't alter what we're seeing. They can only do it down here to us. And they can't alter that solstice, can't alter the shortest, longest days. They can't manage and control that one. So there's some hope there that we can still be grounded and know that we're still connected and these things still happen, and we just got this crazy mess down here really to deal with. And as we said for many years now, it's a prison planet. We're being controlled and manipulated, psychologically propagandized, and go on, Days.
Sorry, Peter. I was just thinking, it's like they've dehumanized their enemy in a way so that they can justify like fucking doing whatever they like to the rest of us as well, haven't they? You're
just numbers on a page.
Yeah, and that's a reality. But also like I say, the other part of it is that side they don't want you to know, which is that connection back to yourself, but back to the earth, back to what happens, what's really going on in nature, what they've taken away. They've turned it into the global, techno crap and everything else we've got to deal with, and all our gadgets and everything else. And we've all been sort of, if you like, herded in that direction. But there's many who are now looking in the other direction now and thinking, and this is the way that you calm yourself down. You get back to who you are. You get back to yourself. And all the rest of it is just, like I say, it's propaganda. And the war, if they're going to do a war, they'll do a war, won't they? But I mean, like I say, we're going to I say Putin and Trump and Boris, they won't be, like I say, they're all sitting pretty. Even the Chinese, all of them, they're all having great times. They're not. I think they just play these games. They constantly play these games. They'll take out generals. They'll do this. Iran will be looking for some kind of way of responding, but they're not going to. I just think it's just going to be like we've had in the past. I think it's just going to be this constant, just on the brink, on the brink, on the brink, just to keep people in that state of fear constantly while they put us through a Brexit fuck up and a whatever fuck up and another thing they'll sign off, which they'll get away with because we might be going to war. In the way that the propaganda works with that, when we saw with the war in 2003, when they went to war with Iraq, and then before that, Americans went to Afghanistan and go back to Kuwait to the early 90s. You can trace these sort of things back, and you can see the pattern as you come forward to now what they're doing now, which is, just creating this fear. They'll take out a country. Yeah, they've been fucking Yemen for how long now? 4 years, 5 years? They've killed how many? There's a massive famine going on there. And like you said, Cookie, you'll see and hear nothing about it in the mainstream, just the odd little appeal that will come out saying help the children and all the rest of it, playing that satanic game, that dark game where, our tax money's been paying for the bombs that actually have been dropping on these people's heads.
Yeah.
And that's the dark satanic game they play with us. And it's sick. It's a sick agenda. And then we see the other stuff coming out with the paedophile stuff and all the rest of it. And then I just want to mention quickly Ricky Gervais and that 2020 Globe speech he did yesterday. Pockets of the Future put a funny little clip up about that. So
I haven't.
Go and have a look. Yeah, I
will look at it, but like I mentioned to you guys before we came on air, I can't stand Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
So when I saw it coming up on the feed, I was just like, it's not something I would normally bother with. But on your recommendation, I'll tune in just to hear what it was he was saying to him, because it sounds like, as you were saying before we started, he's putting out a lot of truth at them, using that opportunity of, you can often speak a lot of truth as comedy, and you get by the censors,
get away with it,
as it were, because you're presenting it as comedy.
Yeah.
I was thinking as well, like Bill Hicks. I'm going to tell you a lot of stuff that's going to piss you off, but I'll tell you a joke or two as well. So just to help ease the pain. But I was thinking as well, that element of them dehumanizing people. I think as well, you've got to allow for the unfortunate reality of the fallibility of man, or mankind. I mean by that, not just men, all of us, that nobody is able to cope with having a personal relationship with that many people at once. And I don't mean sexual or whatever, an intimate relationship. I just mean having a direct concern and interest in and interaction with another individual. All of us are only capable of dealing with a certain number. And beyond that, it becomes unmanageable. This is why in tribal communities, they have a kind of natural peak to the population numbers. When it gets up to around 150 to 200 plus, people start to move out and form a new little tribal group, a new village. Because once the numbers get so high, you cannot personally know the people you're interacting with. They become a stranger. And when somebody becomes a stranger, you lose that direct connection. You call it the love connection. You're talking about the generative energy. So it's an unfortunate inevitability that if we have systems of centralized power and control and structure, then the people who operate those systems, the people who sit at the steering wheel, will inevitably lose contact with the people that they're ruling over. So it's an unfortunate natural reality that if we're going to have a system of monarchs, of rulers, then the ruler is not going to be able to have a direct connection to all of his subjects once the numbers get beyond a certain point. When your nation gets big enough, you can't expect them to have a personal relationship with you, and you shouldn't have the perception that they do. It's unhealthy for you to believe that the Queen is your mum, for example. She's not. She's some separate little woman living in a big house, like I usually say.
I wonder if that possibility for connection with more people would grow with the introduction of something like the bandwidth increase with neural lace.
Potentially, in a hive mind way, but that's the danger of you lose yourself in the hive mind.
Yeah, but then every individual has to lose a little bit of their uniqueness. Otherwise, there's too much shock, because there's a certain amount of time that you have to give to somebody that's new. But what you reminded me of just then was in this Medici series I'm watching, where you've got individual city-states, and they're run by a council, and a lot of the council members are the heads of the different guilds. And it is, you got this in the Spanish Republic as well. You get little districts, and they each put up their own person. Well, everybody in the district does know the person that is sitting on the city council. So in a way, there is a connection with everybody, but it's very difficult to manage those numbers without, like you say, things becoming anonymous.
Becoming dehumanized. And in the end, all you see is a list, a demographic list of numbers, of statistics and whatever. I think that's the message that's encoded in a lot of ancient knowledge, is the beware of the scale of what word could I use for it? Like empire. We've all got our own little personal empires. Within our empire, there's a certain number of people and a certain amount of resources and physical property and stuff like that. That's our own personal little empire. When you start growing or trying to grow that empire to scale, that's when you start getting those, or suffering those effects of dehumanization. It becomes mechanistic. And that's why I often refer to the system as being like a machine, because unfortunately, if you can have things that deal with stuff on such a scale, then the inevitable result is that it separates itself from the living connection. So it becomes mechanistic by nature, and therefore doesn't give a shit about you, because you're just a number. You're another cog in its machinery. If you stop functioning, it will just take you out and replace you with a new cog.
It reminded me of what was wrote on the Georgia Guidestones there. A wee part there.
Yeah. I do think there are ways to avoid those dangers, and that as well is part of the message that's in a lot of the ancient knowledge. There are ways we can interact with each other and have what, in a modern sense, we would call a society, a civilization, that doesn't rely on those kind of centralized power structures. And if you're not reliant on those centralized power structures, then the risk of being drawn into that dehumanization gets reduced. It never truly goes away, but the potential of people succumbing to that kind of problem, it gets less and less and less and less.
Well, look
as well is why I think they determinedly sought out psychopathic mindsets and tried to either heal them or block them from ever participating in those positions that had any influence over groups of others. In other words, positions of power.
Well, looking at things over a huge historical timeline, you had the individual tribes that naturally took an isolated view of the world, and it was because of that you eventually got the tyrants, the highway robbers that started calling themselves kings, taking over vast swathes of land, because the individual settlements couldn't join together in an effective, defense.
Yeah.
So one get fooled again is a lesson that humanity was taking like 4,000 years to learn.
Yeah.
if you see what I mean.
Or we are still learning,
Yeah, assuming we learned quickly, otherwise it'll be 5,000 years.
So that's the thing, we're at that point now, aren't we, where I feel a lot of this stuff, like we've just been talking about, how the problems are created by us supporting and believing in systems that lead to our own dehumanization. So in other words, we're creating our own problems. Are we starting to wake up to that so that we can start making choices so that we don't feed that beast anymore?
Well, mentally and structurally, I was thinking about this the other day. I once said, and I'll stand by it, that the basis of intelligence is comparison. So you've got two pieces of fruit, but then the automatic thing to do is to pick the good one and assume that the other one's bad and throw it away. And that is a very, very sticky way of thinking about things. It's a very basic way. That's what you've got your Tommy Robinsons. All Tommy Robinson's followers need to do is find an easy way to identify the bad apple from the good apple, and then by throwing away all the bad apples, the good apple will be okay still. Now the basis of consciousness is comparison, but it's finding the same in one moment that is in the past moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that you keep hold of the same thought through the changing moments.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've heard it said that the basis of consciousness is pattern selection, pattern identification, and comparison would be essential to that.
Identifying the same thing. So as a part of the same pattern, one moment remains the same, even though moments change. One idea remains the same, whereas the basis of intelligence is a step lower. That's sorting the good from the bad. So
it's like seeing the monistic or singular truth that is split into the duality. It's the same thing. You're describing pattern recognition because you can differentiate one thing from another, and then you make the choice of which one is good and which one is bad. But the fact is that you're going through the process of that defining, of that recognizing a pattern and defining that pattern. So it's the same thing in the kind of making a statement like energy never dies, it just gets transformed. So what you're talking about is being able to identify the transformation. In other words, it was this shape previously, and now it's gone through this transformation, and now it's this new thing. You're defining two separate things, but the energy is still there. And the process that the energy goes through some form of transformation is still a reality. So that is the unifying effect of your thread of consciousness continuing through time.
And so the basis of the consciousness there would be the ability to recognize patterns. Yeah. So even though the energy or the pattern may be changing, you can recognize a pattern. So being able to recognize a pattern is the basis of that consciousness.
Yeah, having the ability to create definition. Because if you don't, it's like, I remember in the past, however many years ago, and sort of talking about the point of view of, you know, in a general kind of sense, you look at reality and a lot of it seems chaotic. It seems like just chaos. You know, a lot of really the fundamental root of what science is and the scientific method is the refining of those techniques that we use to create definitions. Because without those definitions, what you're looking at is just a kaleidoscope of chaos, unrecognized patterns.
Formless.
Yeah, you've got like the void, you know, out of what seems to be the void. What is another interpretation of the word void is that you don't recognize any pattern there. So to you, there seems to be nothing there. But that doesn't mean there is nothing there. It just means that you have been unable to define any pattern within that space, that void. Yeah, so that process of definition and the perception that everything is just chaos. Well, it is until you start making definitions. So one of the kind of ways of describing consciousness, awareness, sentience, is the fact that you can look at something that may seem at first like an image of chaos, but you will start to identify patterns and you have this innate drive, need, ability, capability to do that exact thing, to say, hang on a minute, no, if I draw a line like that, then this is now a whatever you choose to call it. You know, this is a such and such definition. And as soon as you do, this is something else I've pointed out in the past. Every time you do that, as soon as you do it, you in effect, conceptually, you separate it from the everything else. Whereas in the way reality actually works, it's not separate. It's intertwined, interlaced, part of all one and the same thing. So all we're doing is saying, I can see how that correlates to the everything else, but I can look at it as a singular thing defined unto itself, which is the same as us saying I and we. Yeah, the self and the everything else. We're given this perception of separation, that the two are completely distinctly different, defined as separate objects, but they're not. They're one and the same thing.
Part of a vast active living intelligence system.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one single organism. It's one single organism, and we are a fractal emanation of that same organism. We just don't have, I feel anyway, and this is where it gets into theoretical arguments about shit, yeah? I feel that in the level, the layer that we are at in this experience, we don't have the capabilities to comprehend more than a certain amount of the totality of the organism. And what we call evolution, or ascending, or processing, or spiritually growing, is a way of describing the process of gradually being able to cope with more and more data and deal with the definitions that we define out of that data. So the further we go up the ladder, as it were, not the greasy pole, but the true ladder of ascension, Jacob's ladder in some interpretations, that's us growing in our ability to deal with what we would perceive as chaos normally. Now we can see, oh, there's this pattern. And you look at that, you take that perception and apply it to a view of watching people grow up. From a child's infant age, where it can't even tell the difference between the limbs of its body, and then it starts figuring out how the limbs move, and the fact that this bit here equals sustenance and many times pleasure, you know, the joy of eating good food and so. And you can see how they develop, and then the same can be applied to their higher functioning abilities, being able to reason and learn language and blah, 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 and then extend that to the way they interact with others and their social development. To me, you see exactly the same fractal emanation of the process that the singular organism that we are part of is going through. Yeah, we're like the thought in the mind of a child that will become God.
Oddly enough, Goethe describes the same thing, and he says how certain ideas that we have, first of all, they're intellectual, and then the same rhythm of that idea becomes emotional, so we feel it emotionally, and eventually it just becomes a part of our instinct. Yeah, a part of your moving, and by the time that happens, you probably can't even remember the thought that originally it came from. Yeah. So, you know, food for thought.
We're just at a point, we're at a level, I'm using the word level carefully, you know, because I'm not trying to imply that it's like a competition, you know, you're going to get graded, there's going to be a quiz at the end or whatever.
Or a simulation, like a computer game.
Yeah. Yeah, we're at a level where we can only perceive a certain amount, but that kind of accumulation of thoughts that led us to this position go even further back. This is why I don't have any difficulty with the basic concept of evolution, like most people would argue, the kind of Darwinian evolution. I think there's just been a deliberate effort to turn that into an ideological manipulation tool. It doesn't deny the reality of how this environment works. Things change from one form to another, and it's only our perception at this level of the way time works. And for us, our lifespan means we think in quite short time chunks, whereas the reality of this organism is endless. Time doesn't apply to it. Therefore, the very concept and argument that Darwinian evolution can't be true because God made them this way and so it's meaningless, utterly meaningless. This singular organism is everything all at once, all at the same time. So this idea that he made certain things at a certain point in time just becomes totally meaningless. We are everything all at once, all at the same time, all in the same place. So I have been a zebra. I have been whatever, you know, pick a definition, a pattern defined of whatever you want, and I have been that thing at some point in this existence. We all have. We've all been everything. And I know a lot of people think that's just craziness. It's just philosophical explanations of what reality is. You know? Day-to-day life still applies. You still need to eat, still need to get yourself some sun, still need to enjoy your life as you're experiencing it here now. But don't forget that doesn't separate you from the everlasting everythingness that you are part of. Yeah?
I think Mark Passio called that streetwise spirituality.
Yeah, apply yourself to the moment now, but with a perception and an awareness that you are part of an eternal everything. You're just here focusing on this point at the moment. Yeah. That's quite a good place to start wrapping it up. I think that's sort of, hopefully as well, maybe that might give some relevance to what I was talking about last week in terms of that cuckoo phoenix egg. What they're doing in the physical world out there of, I think, Dave, you mentioned it earlier, that kind of foreshadowing, preceding effect of the Great War is coming. That is the cuckoo phoenix in the external world that they're trying to persuade us is going to be the phoenix effect that brings us into the new age, into the new world. And they've been planting this seed of the new world order in one form or another. Yeah, and that includes that being the opposition to themselves, they have quite happily fueled that concept, the theological concept of the new world order, so that we have phrases like the new world order and all the connotations that come along with it. They've quite happily fed that in there because that's part of the foreshadowing effect. Yeah, but that's a cuckoo egg that they've given us in its external representation of people have that expectation that there'll be some world-ending cataclysm and then the next day we'll all start the new version of the world. World 2.0 will be introduced, and everything will be great and wonderful and shiny and happy and blah.
Yeah, well, it's like a constant threat of war, isn't it? A constant threat of war, and also you've got Extinction Rebellion with Greta telling you've got 11 years to go before the planet blows up, or whatever, or we're all going to die. You know?
And it doesn't mean that there aren't things going on in the world, in the outside world, that you should be concerned about and aware of and need to be resolved. And it doesn't mean that there's not. I don't want people to have that impression that you just sit cross-legged and say and that's it and everything's wonderful. But it's also, it should not be your primary concern. It's not one or the other. It's balance of the two, bringing together the duality, like the individual and the collective. You're bringing the two together to be balanced in this reality. Being concerned about what's going on in the world and doing what you can, even if that does just mean talking to each other. You're doing what you can to steer away from those bad potentialities. You shouldn't be obsessed with that and nothing else. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I'll see how far my chat room scrolls back, because I can see it's cut off a bit. I'll say hello to everyone I can in the chat room. Thanks for joining us. If I miss you out, apologies if I'm scrolling too fast or if the chat room's cleared its cache too early. Uni Black Sister, hello. And Super Leads, hello. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. I know I saw a few other names that are tuned in later on. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thanks for giving us your attention for approximately a couple of hours. Committed Escaper, hello. They did the same thing in Fallujah over 4 Blackwater contractors. That's when they tried to pacify Fallujah back in 2004. Yeah, using contractors as a justification. A lot of the conflict that he's playing out at the moment is being fought by contractors and proxy forces of one kind or another. It's something else that they're not honest with a lot of they're not very honest with most of the public about in the media. John Beckett, hello. And Saul Bollocks, hello. Yeah. And Ribbling Bradley, hello, Rebecca. I hope you're having a good new year. Good to see you again. Or, yeah, see you in text kind of thing in the chat box. And Cherish Rosin, hello. Thanks for joining in. And the chat, I think, Lewis Alexander Grimmier, hello. The chat is lagging out a bit there. I think I've said hello to everyone. As I said, thanks for joining in. Apologies if I'm authentic human programming. Hello. Just so I got the chat back. It seems to be back again. It's chugging along nicely again there. Okay, cool. Anyway, sorry, distracted myself trying to read messages. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your attention. We'll be back again this Wednesday for the first reality chat of this year, of the year of vision. I wondered if anybody might have brought up the question of the age of Horus, as Crowley described it, because if any particular time in the calendar is appropriate or seems more appropriate than any other, that 2020 vision, Horus was meant to have the sight. He could see clearly. He had his third eye fully open. So is this the time period that Crowley might have been alluding to when he was talking about the age of Horus? And there's a lot of things that he was suggesting and implying that seem to be happening at the moment. So I haven't seen anybody really bring that up for a while. But we'll see how as the year rolls out. It's only the first week of the calendar so far. So let's see what happens. We're going to wait till the end of the month to see how the Brexit palaver plays out. But, we'll be talking about that on Wednesday, certainly, and a lot of other stuff, no doubt. I think Steve's on Thursday night again as well. I think I missed one Christmas. I was over at my family's, visiting family for Christmas and stuff, but I'll catch up slowly. So thanks again, folks. Take care and don't believe all the bullshit. Keep looking, keep thinking for yourself. And we will see you again soon. Hopefully my voice will sustain for another time. Thanks for joining in, guys. Click the button. Catches. Oh.